Spock is currently having an existential crisis because he can see me on the screen. Now he can see himself on the screen and he just doesn't know what to do. Hey witches, welcome back to my channel. My name is Deidre and this is Wordy Witch Writes. Over here I have Spock. He is currently watching a cat entertainment video on YouTube because he refused to get out of my personal space otherwise. And when I put him out into the hallway, he would just sit and cry. And so this is our compromise for the day. The life of being a pet mom. We have Maggie here as well, snoring in the background. And down here, we have Asta. Everybody's hanging out today for this video. The reason why, my husband's in the garage currently working. He's sawing things, drilling, doing all sorts of fun stuff that's lots of loud noises that my animals aren't super fans of, so they want to be with me. So we're going to make this video. Today we're going to talk about developmental editing. For those of you new to my channel, I am a three-time self-published author so far, and I have 2 young adult paranormal mysteries and 1 contemporary holiday romance. You can pick that up on Amazon. It's available on Kindle Unlimited if you want to check that out. They are linked in the description below. This channel is following me on my journey of leaving teaching and to pursue full-time authorship. I haven't left teaching yet. That is a goal that I have by the fall of 2026, that I'm able to not go back to teaching and that I am able to just pursue this writing thing full time. I like to say it out loud to remind myself because I feel like sometimes teaching for me is a safety net. So, as you guys are probably aware if you've been watching my channel for a while, and maybe you're not, I am currently writing a cozy paranormal mystery series. I have written the first 2 in that series, and I have started developmentally editing the first book. And last week I did a quick video that talked about the steps that I take, or the first step that I take, which is I print out the manuscript, I do all these sort of things just to read it and take some notes. If you want to watch that, this video is linked in the description above. Where this stuff. Maggie, enough. Moving on to step 2. Everybody left. I don't know what they heard, but we had to go defend me from the imaginary intruder. Okay. So this is the self-assessment portion of today's video. So optional, if you're reading your own manuscript, you may not feel that you have to do this because you've written it and you've read it once. If you haven't read it, you definitely need to do this. If you're editing a manuscript for somebody else, I highly recommend that you read it again and you're looking for these elements as you go this time. I don't think you can do a complete assessment of a manuscript if you're reading it for somebody else if you haven't written it, if you haven't read it once through just for like pleasure or to understand what that author is talking about. So I've gotten a manuscript in the past, for instance, that comes to mind is I got one from a author that I know, and she told me that she wrote a thriller, and after I read it I messaged her and I was like, I don't think you wrote a thriller, I think you wrote a romantic suspense. And she took a couple and I sent her like my reasoning why, and because I paused before I continued on with the rest of my edit, she was able to get back to me and she was like, yes, that's actually what I wrote. And so then I was able to adjust the genre expectations, and then she ended up having a stronger manuscript because of it. So that is why if you're doing this for someone else, you definitely need to make sure that you read it once through before you start any of the editing, to make sure that you understand better what the author is trying to do before you go through to offer suggestions on how they can actually achieve that. If you're editing it for yourself, make sure that you've written it, you've read it once, so you're probably good to do this assessment now. But if you want to read it again, that is completely up to you. And maybe you only read it and you wrote it like several years ago and you just reread it and you need to completely refamiliarize yourself with it. That's totally fine. So the very first thing I suggest you do is that you summarize your story in 2 to 3 sentences. If you're able to do that, that means you probably have a good story on your hands. If you're not able to do that, if you're trying to get in all of those details, you need to refine it down more and think specifically about those genre expectations. Okay? The next step I do is list the things you liked about the story. Did you like the main character? Did you like the main quirky side character? Did you enjoy the location? Was the mystery super intriguing? Was there a subplot that you enjoyed? Anything like that is totally fine. Be honest, and it's okay that you liked things about your manuscript. You absolutely should enjoy things about your manuscript, and make sure that you take time to acknowledge the things that you've done well. After you've done that, though, you need to be honest with yourself and what don't you like? Are there soggy parts? Is there dialogue that just doesn't make sense to you? Is everything too, like, beat spaced? Like, it happens, and it doesn't really flow very well? It's completely up to you, okay? Then you need to go through, after you've done that, and you need to assess each individual element, okay? What are those elements that you need to talk about? Well, those are the genre expectations again, and we can break that down even further. Okay, this is just what I like to do. I break it down first because I'm writing a paranormal mystery. I break it down with the central mystery, and I ask myself, is the main mystery compelling and well crafted? Are there enough clues and red herrings to keep the readers guessing? And I go through and I figure out what all of my clues are. And I figure out what all of my red herrings are and if they make sense within the story. And then continue to focus on the mystery. I look at my person who's trying to solve that mystery. Is that sleuth likable and relatable? Does their involvement in the story make sense? And does it feel natural? Okay, I don't know. Sometimes I read mysteries and it's like this person's visiting for a week and they're trying to solve this crime, and they didn't know the person, they don't know the people involved, and it makes really no sense why they're there to solve the crime. So you need to make sure that your sleuth has a viable reason and a realistic reason to be involved in investigating their crime. Typically, they're either considered a suspect or somebody they're very close to and love is considered a suspect, and they need to make sure that they're proven not guilty. And another aspect of this is that typically the police aren't looking past that person for whatever reason. A couple of the red herrings are pointing directly at them, or they're just not very good at their jobs. That's totally happens in some stories, and it's fine. Another thing that I look at is the resolution within the mystery. Do you provide is the mystery solved in a satisfying way? Do you rush through it? Do you just be like, oh, this is it, done, mystery solved? Or is there some drama involved in it? Is there some tension? Is there some conflict? And then at the end of the story, is everything tied up? Are all of your clues and red herrings explained? So obviously, because mystery is so important for a paranormal cozy mystery, that is the first thing that I look for, and you should as well. Another part that I look at more specifically are the cozy elements, and that is more into the world building aspect. And I've told you guys in the past that this is something that I struggle with. Maybe you do too, maybe you don't. But the first thing I look at is setting, and I talked about this before. Is it a small town or a close-knit community? Is it well developed? Does it make sense that all of these people know each other? Does it provide a cozy and inviting atmosphere? And then this goes into the tone as well. Is that lighthearted tone there? Does that atmosphere just make readers feel like you're snuggled up under a blanket drinking a cup of tea or hot chocolate or some coffee or wine, whatever it is that makes you relax? Okay, that is the vibe that you're going for. And you need to make sure that your town gives off that, like, you should make people want to visit there or live there while you're describing your area. And if you're doing a close-knit community, you need to make sure that there's a reason that people want to be there. So we have the mystery elements we look at, then we look at the cozy elements, and now you're going to look at the paranormal aspects if you're writing a paranormal. Are the paranormal elements integrated in the story well enough, or are they kind of just haphazardly thrown in? And is your world building for that believable? Do you create a world where everybody knows that everybody else is a witch or a goblin or a werewolf or a vampire or a fairy, or I don't even know. There's just countless possibilities of what exists in a paranormal world. And you've built that this is just known knowledge, or is it a story where the person is trying to be hidden, so you have to make sure that it is integrated well enough that the normal people aren't going to really notice when other things start happening, and if they do, they don't really know how to react to it, but it's believable. You also need to make sure that your rules for the supernatural are established and followed throughout book 1 and then the rest of the series. You can't break rules because you've decided that it doesn't fit your story. Once you establish those rules, you need to make sure that you're sticking with them, unless you're breaking them because it's part of your mystery. Okay, so the next part that you look at are characters. You've already kind of looked at your sleuth and how they fit into the mystery aspect. Now you're just looking at them as a protagonist in general. You can once again review if they're likable and relatable. You can talk about their flaws. You can talk about anything that goes into building a character. Does she have, and in mine I have to check, does she have a relatable or a unique paranormal ability or connection? Like, does she see ghosts? Mine is a witch, and she didn't know it until the beginning of this story. So, and it's an ancestral inherited thing, and that's why she didn't really know about it. You also need to check your supporting cast. Do you have those quirky characters? Do you have enough of them? Do you have so many characters that it's confusing for the reader to follow along? Do you have a character that maybe you have 2 characters that can maybe be combined into one? And you may make sure that your supporting characters are contributing to the mystery and the cozy atmosphere, that they serve a purpose in the story. You don't need to name every single person that you run into unless they serve a purpose in your mystery. If somebody is just buying a cup of coffee from someone, you don't need to name the person that you're buying coffee from. If they're buying coffee, you need to make sure that it is part of the story. Maybe they're eavesdropping on a conversation, or maybe they're buying coffee and they run into somebody, a suspect, or something like that. You need to make sure there's always a purpose. You don't narrate every single action that an actual person might take. And then the other important aspect or character is the antagonist. You need to make sure that your antagonist is well concealed until it is revealed. Okay, there is nothing worse than knowing exactly who did it and why they did it, and then having 150 or 200 pages left in the story. Nobody's going to want to read your story. You need to make sure that they have a motivation that is believable, that they are introduced early enough that it makes sense that your suspect kind of missed them, or that they were always on the list but didn't really know it, or they had been written off and then more evidence comes to light, something like that. And then you need to make sure that they're believable. Okay? There's nothing more annoying than at the end it's like, oh, this person that we never introduced is now the person that did it. Okay. Readers don't like that. You need to make sure that they have enough clues that point to this person and that they make sense at the end of the story, and that you're able to explain away the red herrings. Another important aspect of cozy mysteries is the victim. If you're doing a murder within your cozy mystery, I don't just do, in mine it's not a murder in the first one, it is in the second one. In the first one it's a hex on the town that my witch has to cure or resolve. So if you're doing a murder, you need to make sure that your victim is unlikable enough that people are sad that they're dead, but they're not that upset, if that makes sense. They need to have a lot of reasons that people would want to kill them. Then you can have a lot of suspects and it makes it an interesting read. So that is just a side note. You need to make sure that you don't kill off a likable person. Oh, and another trope that's super important within cozy mystery is that you can never kill one of your animal companions. People will cancel you if that's still a thing. They do not want their animal companions to die. Even of natural death, they will magically live forever. Just an FYI, if you did not know that already. Okay, the next part. So once you have those genre conventions kind of like sorted out, making sure that you've answered those questions, you need to look at plot and pacing. So the very first thing is structure. Does the story follow the typical cozy mystery structure? And that is, you introduce your character and the town or setting that you're in, the close-knit community. Then you introduce, if you're doing a murder, you introduce that person alive, and then you unalive them pretty quickly into the story. A very popular trope is that our amateur sleuth is the one that discovers the body. You don't have to do that. You can have them just hear about the crime. But typically, a murder happens, they are present for some reason at the discovery of the body. If you're doing a mystery that is not, you need to start having that mystery happen right away, and then have something happen to, so for mine, something happens to her best friend, and that is when she is alerted that something is going on in her town. You need to also make sure that there is a balance between the mystery and the characters. People read cozy mysteries because they like the characters. They like the towns, but they really like the characters and they like the mysteries that they're solving. So you need to make sure that there is a good balance between all of those. And if you're doing a subplot, a very popular subplot of cozy mysteries is a romantic subplot. A lot of people like to have the single female protagonists and the two male options or two options, or maybe you're doing a LGBTQ one. That's totally fine too. Like a romantic subplot is very common in these. I'm doing a personal growth subplot in mine as well, where she is changing careers and pursuing baking full time. So it's just making sure that you aren't focusing too much on those subplots, that they're adding into the story and details about our character, but they're not taking away from that mystery. And then you also need to look at your pacing. Does the story maintain a steady pace without dragging? Do you have a snappy intro? Do you have a satisfying conclusion? Are there any parts that are like dragging out, that are super slow, that you have way too much thinking, way too much, if you want to go with the cliche, telling and not showing? And then are there enough twists and turns to keep your reader engaged? So it's not the same thing over and over again, that they're doing something different in the chapters, that there's a cliffhanger at the end of each chapter to make them want to read on to the next chapter, things like that. The last part that I look at is the writing style in particular. The voice. Does the narrative voice match the cozy mystery genre? Okay, typically cozy mysteries are written in first person. This is just to make it a little bit more intimate, so you feel really connected with that character on the page. If you want people to have a more distance from them, that's why typically thrillers and horrors are written in third person, so you're not in that like moment with that person, you're like observing that moment on that person with the narrator. So most cozies are written in first person. There are some that are written in third. I actually wrote mine in third, and I'm going to switch it to first because I need to make sure that my readers are very connected with my character, and so seeing everything through her eyes will help them with that. Make sure, again, that tone, the writing style is light, witty, and engaging. You don't need $6 words here. Like, you just need to make sure that the story flows, that somebody is reading it. I call them beach reads. They're reading them on the beach. There's lots of other stuff going on around them, but you don't have to like have noise canceling headphones, and you don't need to be taking notes as you're reading this. It's just something that's enjoyable, easy to read. I like to listen to cozy mysteries as I drive because like the descriptions are good enough that I know what's going on, but I can still pay attention to what's going on around me on the road. You also need to check out your dialogue. Does the dialogue sound natural and help reveal the character? Are you making sure that your characters all, if you're there in the South, do all they say y'all? Do they do that sort of thing? The thing that I see a lot of authors do is that they worry about being grammatically correct when people are talking, and 90% of the time, if you're having a conversation with someone, you are not going to be grammatically correct. you say, can I do something instead of may I do something, things like that. So make sure that your characters are staying not grammatically correct when they are talking, because it'll make it sound more realistic. You also need to make sure that your tone for each character is different enough that if you don't do dialogue tags, you're able to tell who is talking based on that conversation. And is there a good mix of mystery solving conversation and cozy chatter? So this is where it's nice to have a gossip center within your characters, like where they go. So it's a coffee shop, a bakery, something like that, where the characters all go to hang out and they catch up on all the gossip. And this can be cozy gossip of somebody's getting married, someone's getting divorced. Typically, in my story specifically, she talks a lot about, like, in this first one, inheriting her cabin and starting her business. So that is the cozy chatter. And then also the, like, subplot of her, like, being interested in this new guy. And then the mystery solving one is, like, trying to solve who's doing this hexing. And so finding a good balance between that is important with your characters. You don't want it all to be about the boy and never about the mystery, and you don't always want it to be about the mystery. You want to know about the boy too, if that makes sense. When I'm reviewing this for a client, I always tell them if I think it's good as a standalone and a series. So if they're working on a standalone, I just let them know, like, yep, this book makes sense. All of these things, this is not something that I actually have to worry about if it's a standalone. But if it's the first or second or third or fourth in a series, I like to let them know that if I, as a new reader, picked it up not knowing that it was a series or not having access to the first 2, 1, or whatever, however many books, wherever this is in the series, doesn't make sense. Do I give enough background information to know about things that happened previously in the book without it dragging? And I'm in that moment with those characters and it doesn't matter. So kind of like a great example of these is the Agatha Christie series with Hercule Poirot. You don't need to know any of the other mysteries to know that he's a good detective. Sometimes it alludes to other mysteries he has solved in the past, but most of the time each book can be read as a standalone. And that is what you're shooting for when you write these. You also need to make sure that when you are doing a series that you're leaving enough of a subplot to continue on into the next series. So that's why I think a lot of people like to do the romance subplots, because you can drag out a slow romance for several books, especially if you're doing, like, in my characters, like, it's the beginning of the summer, then it's the end of summer, and then it's Halloween, and then it's going to be Christmas. So it's easy to drag out that romance over that 6 months period. So it keeps people interested in wanting to see where this goes. The same with the baking business and things like that. Friendships, how they're evolving, all of that. So we're interested in knowing those things. The mystery has to be solved at the end of each book, though. You can have a subplot of a bigger mystery if you want, but it can't be the main mystery. The final thing is that you just go through and give specific feedback. So if you're writing this for yourself, this is where you take the time to say, these are the elements that I did really well, but these are the elements that I need to go in and fix. And this is, I break them down into as many steps I need. So I'm breaking mine down into 3 steps, and I need to focus on, first, upping my paranormal and mystery elements. Then I need to go back through and focus more on world building, and that kind of works in with the paranormal and mystery elements, but I definitely need to go make sure that my world is a lot more cozy than what I have created so far. And within that, I need to also change my entire point of view. I wrote it in third person and I have to change all of it to first person. So that's going to take some time. And then finally, my ending and opening. That's my steps that I need to work on. My ending is really long, or my ending is really short, and my opening is way too long. So I need to make sure that I go back through and clean all of those things up. Okay guys, so I just finished kind of like editing this video, and I just wanted to come in and talk very quickly. I posted all of those questions in the video as I went. If you're interested in writing those down, I highly suggest that you use those questions and you actually take the time to not just answer them in your head, but actually write down your responses and give, like, this is the teacher in me. You need to find support for your answers. So if you are saying that your character does a really good job at something, make sure that you're able to say, like, in chapters 3 and in chapter 8 and in chapter 22 or something like that, that actually supports what you're thinking or saying. And if you can't find the evidence, are you really doing it? So just make sure. This is like a deep dive. This should take you several days or a couple days at least to go through and really examine your manuscript and find out what you need to fix. And then at the end, you take those action steps and you break it down into what you need to do for your manuscript. If you have any questions for me, feel free to leave them in the description below. If you're feeling very overwhelmed and you don't want to edit your own novel, maybe you're just like, I don't think I can do this yet, I don't have time for this. I do developmental editing. I love developmental editing, and I love developmental editing cozy mysteries because I just love cozy mysteries. So if you're looking for a developmental editor, you can go to my website below, or you can leave a comment and I can send you a message and we can talk about a price package for you that works for you for your needs. If you haven't already, I would really love it if you could subscribe so I can continue making appropriate videos for you. So hit that like, hit that subscribe, leave a comment, all of that good stuff so I know I am making stuff that is interesting for you. Okay, I can't wait to see how your self-assessments go. And next week I'm going to talk more about how to break down and where you should start with your developmental edit now that you have a self-assessment. All right, guys, I'll talk to you later.